Welcome to another part of the Comic Book Day. Aussie Comic Book Day. I was going to say drink and draw then. Oh, that's such a habit. Aussie Comic Book Day, live streamed by ComX. We are returning to CCCX show at this special time with Dave and Leigh as my co-host. Dustin couldn't make it because of the time difference. And Leigh, why are you wearing sunglasses?
Well, Shane, it's funny you should say that because it's Australian Comic Book Day and the future is very bright.
I love it.
That was so totally unrehearsed. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
And now, off with them.
There you go.
How's everyone? You got to have a bit of fun on a day like today, don't you?
Yes.
Use the cough, coronavirus, mate.
Oh, I'll just go. Hang on, no, this way. So, how are you, Dave?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been a busy period. I actually missed the Eagle Club on Thursday, which for those who don't know, there's a whole bunch of us that like to catch up once a week. Kind of started during COVID, and we've been just doing it every week as sort of a bit of a catch up. But that was the first one. The year's getting busier and busier, and I was double booked, and I was hoping to get on, but didn't. So I'm glad that I was able to come along today. I'm really looking forward to this. So this is great.
Same. It's good. Very, very good.
Awesome.
And what are we sinking our teeth into today, gentlemen?
So you wanted to talk about word ballooning. Is that correct, Shane?
Yeah, lettering, yeah. Okay.
How do you want us to kick off? Just sort of jump into it, or?
Yeah, just jump in. Do you need to share your screen just so I know? Are you going to share anything? Sure.
I'll see how I go. If I do, I will.
Just get me warned because I've got to let it come up. That's all.
Sure, no problem. Well, I've found myself doing more and more lettering now as I've got a shitty handwriting style. So my signature looks really cool because it's chicken scrawl and it's impossible to read it. So it's become more of a monogram than an actual name. But when it comes to actually doing hand lettering, I really envy guys like Gary Challoner and people like that who just have a really brilliant style to their lettering. But these days you can actually get a lot of fonts that are really well designed that look just like DC or Marvel style lettering, and all of the indies as well. There's one site I'd really recommend if you haven't done lettering and you'd like to get into it. Blambot, BLAMBOT. They have a lot of fonts there for around $20 US, or you can go up higher, but they also have a lot for free as well. There's a couple I would recommend if you check it out. One is just called, it's a science fiction one, sound effects one. Bada Boom isn't bad, but there are others that are equally good. And in terms of just type, where you actually just have the dialogue type, Crime Fighter is an excellent one. And that one's freebie. So, but there are a lot of other good ones. And like if you're doing comics, like for example Gary Della, he with Reverie, he has a particular font that he uses. So when I found I was going to do stuff for him, I just said, okay, well, I'll use yours so that the font style is consistent with what's happening at Reverie. I'm doing a project with Tad Piechkowski, which is a Southern Squadron Dark Nebula crossover. Tad's using a particular font which is similar but not exactly the same as Gary's. So for that particular project, I'm using Tad's. But the principles seem to be pretty much the same. And I don't want to go through all the rules because it can be really tedious just to sort of learn them off. But again, if you go to that Blambot site, there's an amazing on the website. They've got like at the top of the top bar menu. They've got one that's called. Let's see if I can find it. On the top menu, if you go to the resources drop menu, The first one there is called Comic Book Grammar and Tradition. And if you go through that, it's like an amazing tutorial. And I actually teach this at Uni SA in a design course, because they're starting to get into comics now, which is really exciting. And
cool.
this is actually a really, really useful resource, which I would recommend that people check out. And it actually explains where the balloons should go, how you can sort of design the balloons graphically to make them work. And in fact, once you start getting into it, you'll then go back and look at old, 60s Marvel, DC comics and go, oh, Jesus, they were pretty ordinary. If you're a writer, I would really recommend you sort of get into doing the lettering, because for like when I was working for DC and Marvel, even if you weren't the letterer, what would happen is you would turn in a script. Now with Marvel, because the Marvel method was you would write more like a treatment than a full script, although you could put in suggested dialogue, placeholder stuff, or maybe there were some pages which were particularly cinematic where you really wanted to sort of spell them out in detail. They would allow you to do that, but the assumption at Marvel was that if the artist wanted to turn 5 panels into 4, or just ignore what you've written and do their own damn thing, that was tended to be the case. So it was really common that what would happen with Marvel is, even if you did write something close to a full script, it would still have to get sent back to you, and then you would then do the dialogue. And so because of the way Stan Lee used to work, where he would work with maybe half a dozen different artists at the same time, and he would really sometimes just verbally pitch a story to them. They would go away, they would know how to break the story down into panels and so forth. Then it would come back to him and he would just dialogue it. As a writer, that's not really what I call writing. To me, writing is breaking the story down into the panels. It's the pacing, it's the structure. It's I was listening in on Hayden and Spency talking earlier about world building and so forth, and that's really what it's. And when I said I reckon world building's 50%, I wasn't mucking around. I really believe that's like half the work. So the dialogue is really kind of the last final polish that the writer gets to put in on the story. But if the artist has misinterpreted what you've written, or more often than not, you've written something that's undrawable, it's like something that really should be done in a wide shot, but you've got a close up of the eye, and so, sometimes you do need to go back in and re-narrate. But there are also times when the artist, more often than not, will nail the visual so well that you go, Christ, the dialogue's just becoming almost like it's just an exposition dump that's unnecessary, because the artist has sort of carried it all through with the art anyway. So I found, like particularly with DC, that as often as not, I would be going and taking words out of the script rather than adding more in. But so it was really common that what you would then do is place so they would actually send you full-size photocopies, and then the writer would then re-script it, and then they would balloon place it. So they would say, okay, that balloon goes there, that balloon goes there, and so on. And that's a skill that still is vital today, and that's something the computer can't get you out of, knowing where to place the balloons. And I am still amazed at how many professionals cock that up. So the rule's very simply this: in the English-speaking world, we read from left to right, and we read from top to bottom. And so really the first balloon should be in the top right corner, and ideally the last one, if there's more than 2 or 3, will be in the bottom left. Sorry, the first one will be in the top left, and the last one will be in the bottom right. But what you often see is, like, there'll be 2 balloons sort of midway in the panel, and one will be sort of top right-ish, and the other one will be sort of bottom left-ish. And they get that sort of, so you sort of find yourself thinking, which one do I read? Proximity is usually the easiest way to guide the eye. So you can actually have the balloons going in an S shape around a panel or a page. And so long as they are sort of, there's a close proximity and it's obvious where the eye is supposed to go, people will be able to follow that very easily. But I reckon for the novice, and if anybody out there is sort of like new to comics, the biggest mistake most people make is this assumption that the balloon has to belong next to the person who's speaking. And it's not. The balloon is just simply an indication of sound. And if the character's over on the left-hand side, their balloons do not have to be on the left-hand side. It may be And this is always where it's awkward if you got an artist who's drawn the person speaking first on the right-hand side of the page. That's when you have to start thinking, okay, well, I've got someone on the left, someone on the right. The person on the left is speaking second. So how can I get their balloon to be read second? And often it is, okay, then you put the balloon of the person speaking first in the top left corner. That guarantees they'll be read first. And then maybe you have to drop the other one below it. Because, you know, if you're going across to the right, having crossed pointers looks shit, you know, and that's actually a bit of a no-no. So, yeah, that would be something that I reckon I would really urge anybody who's sort of getting into lettering and into balloon placement. The first thing I'd be looking at is, where do you put the balloons? Once you've identified where they go, as a writer, I actually found that if the panel was crowded out, I would try to find ways to maybe allow some of the text from a balloon to go forward into the previous panel or move into the next. So there's a couple of things you can do to do that. One thing is you don't actually have to keep the balloon within the panel that it's actually does. You know, it can overlap into the next panel or start to come in from the preceding. Just be aware that when you do that, it is a graphic element, and so people, you have to be very careful that you're sort of guiding it into the right panel, not bringing it into the wrong place. And I've seen people sort of screw that up as well. So I think those are the order of the flow of the image is really important. So you're thinking in terms of not just narrative flow, but then also the graphic element of the balloon itself, because it actually has a visual characteristic. And this is something I really hate seeing, like a word balloon. You know, somebody's drawn a beautiful picture of a guy, you know, with his chest and the muscles and all of that, and he's standing there, and there's a big balloon over his right shoulder and his, left pec, and you think, okay, well that's just, you've taken the hero element of the image and covered over with text. And from my mind, I'm of the belief that the word balloon should be as invisible as possible. So that's why I tend to shove them into the corners, or I look at the panel and say, okay, where is the negative space? How can I? So to me, I would rather cover a chair than a person, but I'd rather cover a bit of sky than a chair. And there's sort of a, if you like, a hierarchy as to where you're willing to put the balloons. But yeah, try to use negative space, and then try to make the balloons. People have different shapes, but the often weird stretch shapes tend to look a little bit ugly as well. And you've all heard, I'm sure, heard of the golden mean. 8x5 is sort of that visually pleasant shape. I would say if you sort of aim to make your balloons roughly that shape as a starting off point, and then if you have to sort of squeeze them in and into some weird negative areas, then you do it.
It really is. It's a very delicate art, the lettering. Having done stuff for myself with my thumbnails, I always like to do the word bubbles, over the art. Sometimes I scrunch up the paper, throw them out, having a pretty good idea of, what Tam and I are working with, words wise and stuff.
Yeah.
Right about seeing pages where a word bubble can kill a page, straight off the bat in terms of a beautiful piece. And then there's just this big, you may as well throw an ink blot, you know what I mean? Across the image. There's a certain subtlety. People go on about writers and pencilers and inkers and stuff being the integral part. But, there is that other quadrant, which is the lettering. It's a really delicate, important part of how your comic flows. I mean, because I'm with you too. I've read thousands of comics, and there's some comics you open a page and you just go okay. And then I go back to what you were saying, Dave, is I just follow the premise of, okay, start at the left, move to the right, flow with the panels, that sort of stuff. There's a few comic books now that lettering is becoming more popular, as it should be, because, people are realizing the importance of it, that you can read page 1 through to 24 and it just flows. And 10, 15 minutes later, you're done with the comic. There's no speed bumps. There's no hiccups. There's nothing. It's just a wave, man. It's a wind. It's you're straight through it.
I couldn't agree more. Frankly, if they're done right, they're invisible. People don't even. They're not even. They they don't actually, if in fact done well, not only will they not impact with the art, but they'll actually guide the eye through the layout, so it'll actually assist the art in the process. I mean, there is a sort of an inferred amount of time, depending on the size of the word balloon. A big balloon obviously indicates a lot of time is passing, a small one less. So if you break up a big balloon, if you want to slow down the pace, a bigger balloon will work better. If you want to sort of keep it flowing, it's probably better to bust it up into 2 or 3 and allow the eye to sort of almost sort of just roll or slide through
that's
it.
really cool.
That it is, there's a guy called Scott McLeod. He's written a book called Understanding Comics, which is probably about 30 years old now. That's used in unis all the time. I remember when John Ostrander started teaching at university, that was one he used as a textbook. I couldn't recommend it more highly, and it's written as a comic book, so you can actually, and he goes through the principles of dialogue. That's the one. It's the Bible. How much is that now? It's about $40, something like that, or?
I'm not sure actually. I bought this a while ago. It's it'd be about 40 Australian.
I had one of those, and then some bastard I loaned it to. I can't remember who it was. I never got it back, so I've got to get another one. But
mate, I'm getting that old and forgetful with who I lend things to people. It's like my next door neighbor. I was whinging about this to my next door neighbor the other day, and he goes, "Mate, take a photo of it, and then just like put their name on it. So 6 months later, when you think
that's a good idea,
folder on your phone, we can go, that's where I sent that."
Look, when Glenn Lumpson lived in the Barossa, we used to have stuff at each other's place. He probably, when he moved out, he's got it somewhere, I'm sure. Look, I don't know, maybe not. It could be anywhere, but in terms of the flow, you used to. This is one of the things I didn't like about the Marvel method is you get Spider-Man swooping in through a window. And there's Dr. Octopus, and if you looked at the image and that image was sort of a moment from a story, that would maybe play out in about 3 to 4 seconds maximum, and then they'd have 4 exchanges of word balloons because it was a large panel, and so Stan could put all this dialogue in. So they're basically having a conversation as he swoops in, and the conversation, if you read it out in real time, would probably take 40 seconds, maybe a minute, and so you got an image which is 3 or 4 seconds worth of inferred time versus 40 seconds of inferred time in the text. With comics, you can kind of get away with that because it's almost like in a musical, like when you're watching a story and then you suddenly time out for the music and then everything goes into fantasy. Then the song's over and they go back to pretending everything's normal. Maybe balloons sometimes create that, but so you can sort of screw around with time a little bit, but it rather depends on the style that you want to go with as well. I thought I might touch on a couple of things to do with captions. Captions are really interesting because there's so many different functions to them, and this is something that in the past, you go back to the golden ages of Marvel and DC, or rather, really probably even up to the Silver Age. You had 3 basic ways that you would impart text. You'd have your word balloons, you'd have your thought balloons, which is obviously for thinking. The trouble with thought balloons is it's not as cinematic as like using like I actually got to a point where I didn't want to use thought balloons as well at all, because it's such an unnatural sort of way to tell a story where you're kind of cheating rather than revealing stuff through subtext. You just flat out having Spider-Man going, "Wow, that guy over there is a jerk," and you sort of think, well, that's not a very subtle way of telling a story. It works, and if you're pitching a story at 12-year-old boys, which is effectively where Spider-Man targets its audience, that's fine. But I think we can do better. So I remember when that Richard Ray convention happened back in, I think it was sort of 86. That's right. And Jim Steranko came out, and he was actually talking at that time about. He was saying, "I don't like word balloons. There's got to be a better. I don't like thought balloons. There's got to be a better way to get the idea of what people are thinking across." And it was interesting because at that same time, that's where books like The Dark Knight Returns showed up, and then we started to get Frank Miller using captions to indicate thought. And it was a kind of an interesting approach, which I think has sort of become the mainstay of comics now. So the third type was thought balloons. Word balloons. Sorry, there was captions. There is actually a fourth, and that's of course sound effects. But with the captions, captions can serve so many functions now. The first thing is a caption. Probably its simplest function is to do just time and place. So, meanwhile in Paris, or at 3 o'clock that afternoon, something like that, which is like a super text in a movie. And that's sorry, I missed that one.
Oh, that's okay. Just a compliment.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so that's just superimposed text like you get in a movie. Then, so that's probably the simplest form, and that was probably the type of caption that was originally used. But then you've also got first-person narration and second-person narration. So third-person narration would be something like once upon a time, many years ago, there was a young man named Jack, and one day he was blah, 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 and then ... and then we go into the story. So that was a device used a little bit like a time and place thing, and you find yourself, it's a lazy way to do it, but if you need to jump from scene to scene as a transition, or if you don't really want to tell a particular, if it's like Jack went home, asked his mum, and she said piss off, it maybe you don't want to dedicate an entire scene of the story to that, so you might just say that, you might just use that as a caption, and then we pick up the story. I guess, if you watch the start of Star Wars movies, they do precisely that. They have that scroll, and so it's if Star Wars can do it, there's nothing wrong with it, so long as it's not overused. Then you got the first person narration, and God, this is something that a lot of movies do all the time. They begin the movie with, like, if you've seen something like Notting Hill, there'll be almost like a thematic statement about the world. You say, Beverly Hills is a long way from Notting Hill. I grew up in this tiny little area. So it's sort of setting up the scene, but it's more than that, because first off, it's in the first person. So it introduces us to the main character through their voice. But also you kind of get a sense of what the thematic approach of the story is going to be through that first person narration. Caption does that. Narration captions do that very well. So you can use that to establish a sort of a relationship. Hey there. When with the readership. So you've got the third person narration, you've got the third person narration, the first person narration, and of course those time and place super texts. And then you have the basic voiceover, like this is the film noir detective who's giving a story. This is the Phil Marlowe type thing. That's when she walked into into my life and blah, blah, blah. And that thing, I guess, is similar to the first person narration. But if you ever see any of those old movies all the way back to the 50s, like Sunset Boulevard's a really good example, where Joe Gillis is this writer. He actually tells the entire story as a dead person. So we actually meet him dead in the swimming pool face down. So I'm not spoiling it. It's literally the first shot in the movie. And then he just talks about how he got killed. And so he tells the story of his life, or literally before he died, which is sort of an interesting approach. And comics can do that, through voiceover captions as well. And some of the time Joe Gillis would be narrating it as though, well, I thought, screw it, I'm getting out of here. And so he'd be talking about what he's actually thinking. And then it would switch from being him talking about it in the past tense to, he'd literally say, he'd look and see some guys who were trailing him in a car. He'd look up, see them in the rearview mirror, and he'd actually break his narration caption halfway through and go, and then we suddenly realize he's now in real time narrating, but it's his voiceover narration has actually switched from being somebody talking about something in the past to being effectively, and this is what Steranko was on about, his thought balloon is now, it's almost just morphed into a thought balloon, which I thought was a really interesting approach. But that goes back to the 1950s. Literally 1950 was when that film came out. And it took comics probably another 30 years to catch up to that. But I really like that use of a narration caption that can then morph into a word balloon. Hey there, Pete.
Peter.
Hey, Pete.
And so you can then turn that voiceover caption, which is an internal monologue, into a real-time thought balloon. And that's something that's really, really interesting. And then the last use of captions that I've identified, and I'm sure there are other combinations. For example, if you've got a schizophrenic, sometimes they'll have them having an argument in their own head. and Frank Miller would love to does this. So what they do is they just color code them. So like if
I've seen that.
so if it's Clark Kent arguing with the persona of Superman, Clark Kent's might be blue and Superman's is red, and they just flick it backwards and forwards. I've used
question for you, Dave.
Yep.
As a writer and a letterer, do you enjoy getting one last draft of the script? And are you open to big edits to your dialogue and narration if the art calls for it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I was sort of saying at the get-go, that I think that if you are a writer who has skills as an editor, as a letterer, it's a really powerful combination. It also helps the artist a hell of a lot too. So, for example, Spedsy and I are actually doing the Southern Squadron Torn crossover, and I'm actually lettering and colouring in that. So I get to I do the final polish, if you like. But what I would do there is when Ben Sullivan, who's one of the best artists going around at the moment, he turned in the layouts, and then I actually lettered the layouts. So I put them in and then brought them in, blew them up to real size, lettered them, and that enabled us to. And then I realized, okay, there's too much word stuff there, not enough there. So I started moving it around, sent it back to Spedsy and also to Ben and said, this is what I'm thinking. What do you reckon? So there was, and then Rob was then giving me a few, how maybe we need to tweak that. Suddenly we picked up, there was a couple of places where Ben and I actually went, okay, the art's not working there. And he followed the script, but sometimes a mid shot versus a long shot can make a big difference to the flow of time, the perception. That proximity thing can affect the feel of it. And so we actually we sat down and literally went through and said, all right, there are a number of ways we can solve this. The simplest and easiest would be to use dialogue or captions or something like that. But Ben said, these are the artists you want to work with. No, I want to solve this visually. I don't want a Band-Aid, fix. So yeah, absolutely. As a writer, and I guess as an editor too. And in fact, Marvel's editors and DC's editors used to put in their own little, text and so forth. But it really does help if you can then go back and see the text. And if people don't do this, I'd recommend it's worth it. Before you actually get into the pencils, it's a good idea to actually see if you can take the layouts and letter them and just see how the balloons are reading. And the moment you do that, suddenly the story works or doesn't. And then, so now when I get a page from Ben, I just literally drag and drop the balloons on it. There are really slight tweaks, but I think it would take literally 30 seconds. But it's perfect because I know exactly what's going to happen, and we know the story's going to work.
And if there's a mistake, you can get it quick. You don't have to drag it out like in a week before it gets printed or something.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean, like it's just bang. We need to fix that. Yeah.
And it gives Ben a lot of confidence too, because the way you're sitting, there's a little. If you look at just above his head there. Says all the. It looks like a little red pointy hat sticking out the side of his head.
Oh yeah.
Looks great. I love it.
Sorry, I'm in a festive mood, Dave.
I know.
I open the show with sunglasses. I've got this little thing up here. There you go. This is how good I am at special effects, Dave. I planned this for weeks.
It does. It looks like you're wearing a jaunty party hat. That's what it is.
I'm about to bust out the old, like before the show's over. Don't worry, I've got a box of tricks right here.
Yeah. So look, all of that business about captions, the reason I sort of went into that and that level of detail is because each of those techniques are different ways in which you can inject implied sound into your stories. And they all they really then open up your capacity to tell the story in different ways. And you can use dialogue in far more elaborate ways. And particularly this idea of having different internal monologues, sort of where you've, got, and sometimes it can be quite interesting when you've got three people narrating a story and that one person is narrating it and you've given them yellow captions and someone's narrating and they've got blue and so on. you start to get this interesting sort of unreliable narrator element where you might get 2 or 3 people telling the story from different points of view, with the fourth story being the visuals. In fact, I did a story precisely using that technique where I had it was a Southern Squadron story back in the 80s where Lieutenant Smith is in Tasmania, and we never see the other characters, the other 3 members of the team, but they're telling her story. They're recording it onto a reel-to-reel tape. Remember those things?
Yes.
And so even in black and white, I think I had one in grey, one in black, and one in white. And so each character would tell their version of the story and give their spin on Lieutenant Smith. So it was an interesting technique because you could sort of use the dialogue or the voiceover technique in comics to sort of add, slow down the read and add more interest to it. It meant that we could actually see the story playing out in real time and then actually have get a sense of who the other characters were by their personalities, by the way they told the story. So even though they weren't actually in the story, this was still a team storybook because we had all 4 members of the team playing a
That's
role.
really cool.
So you can have a lot of fun. And the last one you can use, there are 2 other ways you can use captions, which are really useful. You probably noticed in the Avengers that they all seem to have like communication devices. You never see them, so they're just all talking to each other, and Captain America's down on the street just chatting, and there's somebody else up on the rooftop firing arrows, and they're just talking backwards and forwards, and we just assume that they must all have comms. You can do that with captions really, really easily, and I've used that technique quite well. It's a way that you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. And the one that I really like is where you can actually use a caption as a sort of a continuation of text, or an in film we call these J cuts and L cuts, but basically what it is that the person the person is talking, but we actually cut halfway through their line, and then we pick up the rest of. We hear the continuation of their conversation over the next image. So a good example of this would be 2 guys walking out of the door and saying, right, that's it. Next thing we need to do is get over to, and then ... And then you get to a shot of Paris, and then you would have in a caption ... Paris. And then you use quotations to indicate that that's a continuation of a line. And that's one really good way that if you're cutting between scenes, it allows you. They call it an L cut or a J cut because when you edit, as you know, Syddall, the dialogue is on a line underneath the video, and if the dialogue line is longer than the video line, then it looks like an L shape, and if it starts beforehand and comes into it, then it looks like a J. So it's a good way to in film you'll see it's really commonly used to link scenes through transition if there's no sort of cute art house or arts college type funky transitions going on. It's just a straight cut. They'll still find a way to link it by using these visual where they have an audio link, which where the audio either begins before the scene ends or the other one continues on to the next one. And you can use the caption with with words in quotations, and then either ... before or after. God, I'm sounding like Donald Trump. Then that's a really good way to link dialogue. So those are all the techniques that I would implore anybody who's sort of a writer who these are all great techniques that if you're a writer who's not going to be a letterer, I would really urge you to sort of try to form a relationship with the editor, and so because and put the descriptions within the script of how where the lettering has got to go and why, because it actually, as you said, Leigh, it makes a huge difference to the way the story is read and the psychology of it.
Yeah,
the other
for
one
me
is sound
personally, it just I always do, like for Battle for Bustle, I've always done the thumbnails, and then when I'm happy with those, I do go back to the script, draw in my word bubbles where I think they're positioned, do it that way, hand write them all. So I actually do. I'm probably a bit of a dill like this, but I actually cut them out with the words in them, right, and blue tack them to the thumbnails and see if it works, and then I read the comic. And then if it doesn't work, I highlight certain panels and things like that I think need to be changed, overemphasized. Like, I mean, that's just my way of working.
It's pretty much what I do, but I just do the same thing digitally, but the principle is identical.
Yeah. And I've found that's helped me. It's helped me become, a better writer. It's easier for me and Tam when we sit down to sort this stuff out. You're saving time because the art within yourself and the script is secure as it can be. There are times though where, like, Tam and I look at each other and we both go, "Yeah, it's not. Nah, buggered that one up, not working." But usually it's a pretty good, like, this panel out the back into the granny flat. This is what we need to do, and then digitally, scan, reinsert, make it work, that sort of thing. So I'm not like, that far out of the computer world. I mean, I can turn them on.
Yeah. Do you use sound effects much in your stories?
With one particular character, look, I've got to be honest with you, Dave. I do like a good badoom every now and then.
Yeah.
I find that works. But I'm sort of stuck. I have to use sound effects with a particular character I have called Hanson, and he's a gentleman with an awful lot of guns. And there's not too many panels where, when he's in action, you can't really have silence, and we're having quite a lot of fun actually discovering, because I guess when it comes to the sound effects, I find, like, we stick to we've got a particular text that we like for the words and things. But when it comes to the sound effects, man, I love shaking it up. Hey, I'm a bit of I grew up on Marvel comics and stuff. I love how you'd get a page and there'd be like 10 different, like things that have stars in them and things that, like bow and all that sort of stuff. Like, so that's always stuck with me. So yeah, I find the sound effects can be very useful in artwork too. It's probably very over the top of me, but I do take all that into consideration too. Like, they're in the thumbnails, the sound effects and things.
Oh, absolutely. And
and Tam loves the sound effects, and like, man, we can have afternoons.
Well, with a name like Tam, I mean, it sounds like a sound effect, doesn't it?
Oh, mate, Bam Tam, like, that's the nickname, is Bam Tam. So it's we have great fun with sound effects. Some days we sit in the granny flat laughing our heads off. All that work, is that too over the top? Nah, let it go. Like, as long as when we did
the Phantom, we got interviewed by Steve Vizard on his program, and he wanted to go on about the sound effects, but we actually he had to. So I think they might have even edited it out. It was supposed to be live, but these things were pre-recorded. But we did a series called Bodyguard for Penthouse. This is Glenn Lunston and myself, and so he actually asked, "So what were some of the sound effects you used there?" And Glenn went, "Oh, pork, root, And
I actually,
so that's the thing. You can actually use real words. So you're like, somebody's creeping up the stairs. It's a little bit like, the cartoon cats, and as they go up, you hear the little xylophone going. Duk, 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 duk. So, you can just literally have the words creep, 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 and so I find that they're fantastic for humor. But the other thing is sound effects, because it's an immediate sort of when you have a sort of sound that can be experienced in, I guess, with a sound effect, it's sort of inferring that sound is locked into that moment. Where if you don't put in a sound, then people kind of hear the sounds in their heads. They fill up a city scene. But if there's no honk honk, then they'll probably they'll stretch the time period out more. But if they just hear honk honk, that sort of is saying, well, that's the amount of time that you're supposed to spend on the panel. So it's a way, again, of controlling the time and the flow of the read. But I also find, like, you can sort of inject humor. Like, so I had this scene where the dingo was creeping after this little goblin in the woods. And rather than just going sniff, 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 which is, Rob and I went, he's going sniff, so he's actually now sniff, sniff, sniffity, sniff. And it sort of gives a bit of rhythm to it. But it also, I mean, you guys both immediately sort of giggle because it's sort of a little bit absurd. So it's an instant way to create genre by, putting little,
yes.
so if you have somebody punched in the head and it's bam, that's different to whammo, and like the Squadron, because they were very Australian, I'd always give them, Aussie sounding, hits and stuff like that. And we had, the Cyclone days, there were certain ones that, the Wilhelm scream, that you heard about that? Yeah. For those who don't know, that there was a guy called Wilhelm who used to do, wasn't quite folding. Folding is when if you want to hear somebody's head chopped off, they slide a bit of metal across another bit of metal and then cut a lettuce in half, and it sounds like a guillotine chopping someone's head off. And so most sound effects that you hear in movies are kind of invented from weird things which have nothing to do with, like, apparently the sound of the doors opening and closing in the Star Trek TV show was somebody pulling a piece of A4 paper in and out of an A4 envelope, and it's that shh sound. And once you're aware of it, it just ruins it forever. So I just bug it up everybody's experience of Star Trek.
For all those Star Trek fans out there that wanted doors that sounded like that,
it's hilarious, isn't it?
You've ended the dream.
So Wilhelm is one of these guys who would. So they'd actually, like, a lot of the screams and stuff like that would be done by voice actors, a little bit like in cartoons. And so his Wilhelm scream goes, ah! It's sort of, it sounds almost comical. It's been around since I think the 40s. But just about every major action film, there's just it's a thing about, we've got to get that in there somewhere. So you hear it in Harry Potter and Lord of Rings. All of them have them in there somewhere, and it's one of those games that sound people play of pick the Wilhelm scream. So we would do that too. So, like, for example, and now everybody will be aware of this. Anytime you see thunder or lightning in a Cyclone comic, it always makes the sound of not crackoom, but crackoomer. I think Glenn Lumpson came up with that one in the Southern Cross, and we all loved it and said, okay, crackoomer, that's always going to be one. And spod, for some reason. So that was either a punch, or it could be in the Puppet Master, they pull the head off a puppet, and so it's spod. And so you'll see the word spod appearing a lot. It's just, and they're just little in-jokes that, the creators have with each other. So I reckon it's probably fun to get a few of those. And so when we did the Squadron Torn crossover, every single sound effect was discussed. They weren't just arbitrary. They were all there for a very particular purpose. And
oh, wow.
so, yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's one part of it I really like. But you can get a lot of humor and a lot of time control into the read of the story. Because remember, comics, the one thing that you don't have power over with the reader is the flow of time. They can flip through the pages, they can jump forward or back. Even in a novel, it's hard to do that. You might jump 3 pages, but you can't connect. But in a comic, you can literally flick 3 pages and get the very quick gist of what's going on, and then stop and start reading there. The only other equivalent would be maybe fast forwarding through a movie. So the writer and the artist have to find ways to control the read and the flow of the read and the pace of the read. And it's actually something, I don't know if enough people really sort of do that. But word balloons and just lettering in general is a really powerful tool, and it has such a role in the story, far more than just imparting the words across. And that's before we even get into the actual different fonts and why some are more friendly and some are more vicious and so on. So,
and then to add emphasis to certain things, you can bold certain words. Like you can, if Spedsy was here right now, if he's listening, he'd know that I act out a lot of the scripts that we write. Like, he's got a recording of a particular one that he's probably going to hold me to ransom one day. But I love doing that because it just brings you close to the character, and it does emphasize the lettering because, man, I'm 100% with you, Dave. Lettering is a really integral part of the whole comic book thing, and it is a story. It's the flow. Like Tam and I got to a point at one point in issue 3 of Battle for Bustle where there's this very intensive, action-packed sequence and stuff, and a creature jumps out at another particular individual, and there was a change on the next page of emphasis into the next part of the story. So it had to happen real quick, and we were stuck. And much like you're saying with a sound effect, we were just sitting here one day and we went to emphasize that the creature gets shot, slides into a wall, hits the head, and then other characters are introduced. And we both looked at each other and went, why don't we just go with bump?
Yeah.
And we put bump in. And when you read the comic book, for me, it just worked because it brought the action slowed, frenetic bump. Next point, which was the next page. So no, I'm 100% with you, man. Like
that was actually interesting when Ben turned in the layouts for the Torn Squadron crossover. One of his first comments when he saw that, because I sent almost immediately him and Spedsy got the pages back lettered, and his biggest comment was on the sound effects. He said, "It's amazing how it changes the action. It just enhances things." And I think the other thing too is if you see a comic that's really professionally lettered, and the scale of the lettering is the right size, and it's all just done in a very sort of polished manner, to me that's like the production value of a movie. If I see a visually naive, clunky art style, and the lettering is equally clunky, if not more so, my tendency is to think this is the work of somebody whose skills are still developing, and this is, that's my default position. But if I see a clunky sort of naive art style, and then I see those really well-placed balloons and great lettering and so forth, I tend to then believe that maybe that art choice was deliberate rather than that was the best they could do. And then I start to, see it more of a stylistic choice rather than a lack of technical skill. And maybe that's unfair, but there's nothing wrong with naive art. But if everything's naive, then there's a tendency to think maybe they could have done better, but maybe they wanted to do better that they couldn't, rather than, that was a conscious artistic decision. And I think that when you see the a control of the lettering and a control of the word balloon placement, it's a little bit like that last when we listened to was it Darren, and who was the other one with him, Syddall? Was it Shane?
Darren and Sean.
Sean, yeah. And they were talking about, you have to have confidence and trust in the process, and if people trust what you're doing, they tend to go along for the ride. They tend to give you the benefit of the doubt. I think that with art it's the same, that if people see that there are high levels of control in one aspect, they just automatically assume that must apply throughout. So sense. So if you have a sort of a slightly clunky art style, and even if you are saying to yourself, I could do better, seriously, just putting really polished, well-placed word balloons onto the page will just give everybody a far greater sense of the experience. That was always, I found with Cyclone, that like we had Gary Challenger doing all the lettering, and that just lifted it to that extra level. And I think people certainly forgave my art more than maybe I deserved. So
nice.
Christ, I can't believe we've almost talked for an hour about lettering. It's and we haven't even got into the technicals. I don't want to bore people shitless with that, but the way I actually letter is I like using digital lettering because it's very easy to change it. There's nothing wrong with printing stuff out, sticking it down on the page. That's basically how DC and Marvel did it up until maybe the mid-90s. They would either, what would happen is often the penciled pages would be sent to the letterer. The letterer would then put the pencils in, the letters in over the pencils. The advantage then is the inker wasn't inking stuff that was never going to be seen, and then the inker would then get the pages, and the whole thing was baked into one big piece of art. The other option was if the penciler and inker were the same person, they would ink the whole page, and then the letterer would letter it on another sheet of paper, and then some poor bastard had to cut them all out very neatly and stick them down, and that's a real pain. And try to, and then the printers would have to make sure there were no drop shadows. So that was, and I'm sure, Lee, you know the hassles of that.
Oh, yeah.
Cleaning
especially
up
cleaning up after you've done it.
Yeah. Always the way, isn't it?
And there's paper everywhere, man.
Yeah.
It's
And
like snowed in North Queensland.
So digital is really beneficial like that. And so the only real advice I would offer most people is that most programs now, and the three, probably the most obvious ones would be Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. InDesign, for those who don't know, is sort of a paste up program, which is really more suited to if you're trying to put multiple pages together into a book. That's where I would use InDesign. If you're going to use individual pages, I would tend to go with Photoshop or Illustrator. And these three programs they're all part of the Adobe suite, and they all over the years have started to converge towards each other. Photoshop started off very much as just a program which was primarily focusing on using pixels. And with pixels, as you zoom in, the pixels get bigger and bigger, and the resolution gets fairer and fairer. Where Illustrator worked with vectors, and the idea of a vector is it's like a mathematical formula. So if you zoom in on a circle, it always remains a circle because the pixels just are reconfigured. You can use vectors now in Photoshop. So lettering, the text tool is a vector tool, so you can blow it up or shrink it down, and it's always going to be sharp. But I would use the polygon shape tool, and the modern version of Photoshop doesn't have it, but there are actually word balloon shapes which you can get in Photoshop. And the easiest way I would suggest you do it is just Google, how do I find the word balloon, or I think they call them speech bubbles. I hate that term. No one in the industry uses it, but anyway, you could just say word balloon or speech bubble tool, and it's actually a legacy shape. So you'll have to open it and import it. But once you've done it once, then it's there forever. And then you need to adjust it using a thing called Bezier curves. And basically there are key points which you can then morph and twist and so forth. And that's a tutorial in itself. But again, if you just Google, how do I use Bezier curves? It's one of those things that the first time you do it, you'll get the shits. You'll say, fuck Dave, I'll never do, and it'll take you probably half an hour to an hour to stop losing your temper. But it's one of those things where, there are certain skills that once you learn how to use it, you go, okay, now I've got that one forever. And it would be worth spending literally an afternoon just learning how to use them.
Well, thank God, Dave, that Shane is his email's known to everyone, so I won't get any of the bad press from that during the week after.
I haven't used Clip Studio, Lauren, but I've heard great things about it. And look, there's lots of different techniques, but I would say I just use the Adobe suite because I'm a filmmaker, so I use it through that as well. But what I would be saying is make sure you work in vectors. If that way you can expand and contract the images. So what I literally do is I'll do the text on one layer using the text tool. Then I'll create a layer underneath it, which is a shape layer, where I'll usually use the word balloon shapes or caption shapes. The beauty of those is you can change the colors, you can change the weight of the stroke, which is, for those who don't know, that's the outline. And the color of the fill and the inside bit. And then I just have those two as two separate layers, and then I put them inside a little folder, and then I just number each folder for that page. So if I've got 10 balloons, they're folders are numbered 1 to 10. And so when you move the folder, you're moving the text within the balloon.
Okay.
And the easiest way to, and this is where Photoshop is converging with InDesign, is that with InDesign, what you do with a text tool is you actually start at the top left and then pull a shape to the bottom right, and then you type within that shape, and then you can adjust the shape. And as you change the shape out borders, the text starts to wrap around into the shape that you want. That same feature occurs in Photoshop now. So if you use a text tool so if you've ever used InDesign, everything that you can do with text in InDesign, you can now use in Photoshop. And the other thing that Photoshop does, which is really cool, and I think this came in 2019, they have the InDesign guides. If you move the text shapes around, they'll find the center point, and and they'll align text with each other and so forth. It just throws up these little positional lines. So you can do all of that also in Illustrator, but most people working in comics, I think, will probably be drawing in Photoshop, or like Leigh, maybe hand drawing and then scanning it in. So my suggestion is, use InDesign. Use those InDesign inspired vector tools in Photoshop. It's a really simple way to do it. Anybody who wants to know, I'm happy to talk about it later if they like. So, and I think that's sort of all the main points. There's a lot to it, isn't there?
Oh,
there
mate.
is. Yeah, there is.
Yeah. I just thought it was all about writing the script and drawing, and then you two know the story of me starting Battle for Bustle years ago, and then I would say that lettering, as you've even touched on here, Dave, has a whole nother language to it, and you've only touched on a bit of it, and there's more rules than that. There's more of the.
We haven't talked about headings or text hierarchy or any of that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you think, yep, I've done a page. I'll just whack some letters on there. And no, you can. But as you said, Dave, if you do it right with lettering and stuff like that, it can enhance a page. It can enhance a story. It can, even a cover, but it's all about communication, man, too, with the artistic crew, you've done with, Spedsy and Ben and stuff like that. If you're doing it yourself, obviously you communicate to yourself and learn from your trials and errors. But if you're with other people and you're creating, a comic book, communication is the thing, and just bounce it backwards and forwards. And I think it's important that the writer should be able to say to the artist or the inker or the letterer, I'm thinking this, what do you reckon? Can we throw that? And then they bounce it back too. But then I'm not particularly precious with that stuff either, man. I love the flow and stuff, but to me, lettering, underrated art of the comic book, 100%.
Well, one thing I would suggest is that if you're a writer and you've formed a relationship with an artist, and you guys are sort of planning to split the money, whatever, when you get to that point, it's a good skill for the writer to have, because it's time consuming. The artist is always going to spend more time on a page than the writer is, no matter how. My bloody cat won't piss off. No matter how.
Let's get on the show.
Yeah. So one of the advantages, as I said, from a writer's point of view, you will actually be able to contribute more. Yes, I do have a cat. Yes, but from the writer's point of view, it enables them to contribute more towards the project, so that you're sharing the love and the labor around a little bit more. But also, as we've spoken about, I think that there are a lot of elements, sort of writing elements within that can be enhanced by lettering, that I think a lot of writers don't fully appreciate, or don't take full advantage of. And so I think there is a lot of advantage in doing that. Yeah. And we've just used up an hour, mate.
Yeah, we did.
We've got time.
It's like you planned it.
Yeah.
Mr. De
Well,
Vries.
thanks
Swear I've done this before.
Hey, mate.
Yeah.
Sorry?
You're on fire today, mate.
No, it's good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
No, same.
Well, thanks so much for joining us and sharing all that. That was awesome.
Yep.
As someone who
100%.
doesn't do any of the comic, that was an excellent learning experience for me. All I do is print them.
Yeah.
That's another art in itself, Shane.
Well, yeah, that's
that is
an
a big-
organizational art.
Yeah. No, there's a lot. That's so important too. That having the art, the graphics. I mean, that's something that when I opened up your comics, Comics Presents, I think everybody said the same. They're just blown away by the look of it, the even things like the choice of paper stock, but the layout, the color, the choice, everything about it, that just, that's going to be a great experience before you even start reading. Hey, Ben.
Oh, Ben, how you going, buddy?
And that's Mark.
Thank you, Non-Inspirational Gaming.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much, Dave. I guess we'll move on to the next part. Have a great day. Continue watching for sure. And thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you on. And a pleasure learning from you.
Enjoying it.
See you, mate.
Great work, Sizzle.
That was awesome. So we've done the educational part of CCCX. That was amazing.
Oh.
So next we're going on to talk to Zach George. So everyone knows he's had a bit of a journey from just drawing some pictures to becoming a publisher, and we're going to talk about that everything in between. So I'll bring Zach on so we can all say g'day. Hey, Zach.
That's better.
Hello, Zach. How's things?
How are you, Lee?
Good, mate. Don't be cheeky now. Oh, you little bugger.
It's an example, so I'm allowed to show it.
Yes. That's just an in-joke, everyone watching.
Yeah,
Sorry,
a bit of an in-joke there.
Yeah.
Zach's been teasing Lee with the proof.
I'll get you in the end, Zach.
Oh, you'll have to by Monday. Calm down.
Oh, I know. I mean, I'm always calm. I'm like a cucumber. Cool. No, not really. I'm more like a donut round. But so what's going on, Zach?
I've come to answer your questions on many, many things.
Excellent.
Oh, nice.
Is there a particular question that you would like it to answer first?
Just fire them away.
Well, I guess we could always start at the beginning.
We could.
Mm-hmm.
We could. So what got you into comics?
I read them as a kid.
Yep.
It was my mother's way of completing her uni and keeping me quiet in the corner.
That's awesome.
And then I always drew, and then I always wanted to work in mainstream, either draw for Batman or Wonder Woman. And eventually it just hit a point where I was just like, you know what, fuck it, I'll do my own. I can't wait forever. So
cool.
Then Bronwyn was born.
And you've
So
been
Bronwyn
powering
is
through,
the
mate. You've
first?
got a Kickstarter and everything happening with Bronwyn, reprinting the original issues all going on right now. You got Vivian happening. Like, you aren't stopping, mate. You're like...
I know. Insomnia is the best friend for an artist.
Spinning many plates, mate, on many fingers at the moment.
Yeah.
You're an Insomnia.
So Bronwyn was the first book I created. She's had a bit of a constant rewrite. First two versions of her, if you ever see the first version of her, it's dramatically different. But that just comes with it. You learn, you figure out, like, that doesn't work. So you kind of pander to the audience a little bit.
Yep.
But this new version's working. So you learn from your mistakes to get it right.
Yeah, that's one thing, man. It's ever evolving, isn't it, with all this stuff? You know, you learn. You could, you think you do a perfect image now, and then suddenly you find another artist or writer that the next day you're just like, what? You know, like, and then you look back at your work and you go, damn, you know. And it
that's what I saw when I did the recompiled everything for the Kickstarter reprints. There's so much of it. I'm like, why did I do that? And you just look through it and you're like, I can draw that better now. So it's good in that way that you can see change. So.
Yeah. No, I like it. So you went back and wanted to change everything to get Bronwyn now up to the standard where you feel like you are as a creator?
Well, Bronwyn disappeared.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. But the other night on a Friday drink and draw, we had Kieran Jack on, and he was saying that with his reprint of his particular comic, The Talking Bread, I believe, he decided to leave the original, you know, artwork and stuff, regardless of, you know, where he could see he was now. What fundamentally made you decide, like, no, I'm going to change it, do it better? What brought you to that?
I didn't in the end.
Yeah.
And there's in all 3 issues, there's a letter in the beginning explaining that it's. I understand that these are older, and the more recent stuff is more developed. And but I think it's also important that the readers or other like comic artists, not that I have that many, but to like not sound obnoxious or anything, but I think it's important that they see you're not perfect from day one.
Yep.
So
I like that.
it is just owning like that's what it was at the time.
Yep.
But for the trade, I'm expanding and adding stuff for the trade, and I'll probably touch a few things up here and there for the trade.
Yeah.
But for the reprint purpose, like it is a reprint, it's a facsimile in the end. So I think they should get what it originally looked like.
Mate, we were talking the last couple of days about my huge appreciation of the Crow comic book. And what I love about the Crow is it was done over a long period of time. And when you first read the first few pages and see the art and the writing and the style, and then in comparison to the artist that is James O'Barr, by the time he gets to the end of the story, it's like you've just watched your kid grow from baby to like graduating high school. You know what I mean? There's this massive
Very
development, and I actually really love that concept, because even I go back with Battle for Bustle and I think about touching things up, and like yourself, Zach, is like, I could do that better now, I could do this, but I think to myself, like, you know what, just let it lay. That's where I was at the time. I'm different now.
Yeah.
You know, like it is what it was for the time and stuff, man. And I like that idea and thought process you're going through. Of course, everyone's different, but you can get bogged down on stuff, can't you? You just end up drawing the same issue like 20 times.
Eventually,
you never be happy with it. It's like one day you've just got to go, no, you know, like stop.
Yeah.
Like, just get it out.
But I think that too, especially in the indie thing, like it is a case of publish or perish in a way.
Yeah.
So it is a case of like, I could spend another, like, I hate that hand. I could spend another 2 hours on it, but I've got another 10 pages to do for my deadline. So it's a case of if I get time, I might go back. I may go back eventually and fix it.
But. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, man, I get it.
Especially if you do everything yourself. That's when you're really under the crunch to get everything done.
Oh man, it's not much fun, that crunch. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I think when you've got people that are, you know, whether it's yourself and you're just feeling good, and this is what you want to do, with whether you're with a team, you communicate and you create and you're doing your stuff. At the end of the day, I mean, everything. My 2 bobs worth is whether it's business or whether it's, you know, being a mechanic or whatever. Everything is essentially about starts with creativity. So at the end of the day, if it's a product, it's finished, and it's something to be proud of. And I think, what we're all doing, across the broader community, everyone that's been on today, the times, the efforts, their artwork, their output, all that sort of stuff. This is a day where, quite frankly, it's like people should, reflect on what they've done over the last 12 months and
agreed.
and give themselves a good thumbs up. They don't, they don't need me to say, hey, man, you're a champion or you're a legend or anything like that. Like, just sit back and go like, man, it's Australian Comic Book Day. You're all part of it. The community's great. It's whether you're right or wrong, it's all a learning process. I mean, mate, and as long as you're proud of your product, no one can take that away from you.
Yep.
And your artwork's wicked, man.
Oh, yeah.
You're
Awesome.
improving out of
Amazing.
sight back, like I'm seeing you pump stuff out, man. That's the advantage of, being, Spedsy touched on it before, is I wasn't aware of a lot of us, until 18 months ago, 12 months ago. And I can already look at where I was before I met you guys and the improvements within myself as a person and an artist and stuff like that. So I would hope in 12 months' time, people can reflect on the next Australian Comic Book Day and go like, came a long way in a year, that sort of stuff. Yeah. I mean, look
Definitely.
at you guys, man, like you said before, Shane, started off just wanting to do an index of, easy places for people to find comic book shops. Suddenly, you're meeting everyone. You've got calendars going. Zach's here with you. Like you're doing your graphic design. You've got ComX Studios happening. You've got, comic books in a shop. I mean, like, when you really look at it, I know it seems like it's probably been it's only such a short period of time with so much work. And it's, it's rocked, man. I don't think there'd be too many people out there listening to it if they're listening to me drone on would disagree. So, that's great.
Well, I'll just jump in here just to get the journey that we're talking about that you've gone through. So, what was it like when you brought out you physically got your first comic, when you self-published, I guess is probably the best way to say it?
My first ever comic book was A4 folded into A5 from Officeworks.
Oh, nice.
And I don't even have a copy of it anymore, which really upsets me. I could reprint a new one, I guess. But
there's your first stretch goal for Bronwyn.
There you go.
The original issue that terrified people away to begin with. And it is that moment where you're like, I did this. Like, it's to the best of my ability at the time. And I actually put a book together. Because you see, a lot of people, I've had this a few times, be like, oh, comics are easy to do. And you're like, okay, we'll go do one. They get 2 pages in and they come back and it's like, wow, I can't even do it. I don't get it. And you get that with people who do covers and everything. They go to sequential and they buckle. And they're like, it's a lot harder than it is. I'm like, yeah, because you're you're not just drawing pictures. You have to think director. You have to think dialogue so you can see the angles where it makes sense that they're talking. And you're pretty much a director.
And you're
as
acting.
Well.
I mean,
and you're acting it out as well.
Those
and
characters, you know what I mean? Like, they all come from your mind.
And then from that first issue, I actually had 2 original issues come out. One was called Ascension. That was the original version of Bronwyn. And then the second one was called Curse of the Conies.
Okay.
And that issue did a lot better than Bronwyn. But again, it was a smaller print run. And you quickly learn from the feedback, like, okay, the quality wasn't great. Figure that out for the story had some plot holes. The best advice I ever got from the first Bronwyn issue was my sister read it and she said, I can't decide who the main character is. So I think it's like people say don't get your family to read it, but if you have siblings, they will be honest with you.
This is true.
So then Bronwyn went under a massive rewrite again. So I don't know. It's constant evolution, really.
Yeah.
And then so that came out in 2013, and then she disappeared till 2016 when I redid the first issue again, which is what the reprints are. So between 2016 to 17, I did the 3 issues. Got sick, and then I did the first of the Wrath of the Curse crossover the year later, and that was a uni assignment, so I worked into my uni, so I actually could do it.
Smart.
And then and then again I took another year, and then I started the further adventures because I had started Bronwyn kind of at the middle of her story. I'm like, let's go backwards a bit.
Okay, so that's what the further adventures is.
Yeah, it's the prelude.
Prelude. I think you've explained this.
I should have called it prelude, to be honest, but rebranding.
Evolution.
So yeah.
I'm going to let my dog out of the granny flat. He wants to chase a bird. Give me about 30 seconds.
All good. All good. So, Zach, I'll continue on here. So that was your experience of self-publishing your first book. So you went on to then self-publish the Bronwyns that we know in 2016. And then you had a break. You were sick. Is that when you were sick?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then Further Adventures is, I think that's when we met, was when Further Adventures came out.
Around there.
I think that's the story for everyone.
2020 is when Further Adventures came out.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Oh, yeah, it's been a year. Yes. Just a funny story for anyone who's watching.
2019.
2019. Oh, that's even worse.
I know. Issue 2 is coming, I swear.
Oh no! I mean
the
story about my delivery. I thought I hadn't got my delivery of Further Adventures, and I've contacted Zach and said, "Can you send me another one?" Luckily, he didn't send me another one because I was cleaning out the garage, and under the door of the garage, it looks like the postie had slipped it under there, and we hadn't used the garage for about a year, so it had been sitting there for a year. And that was my little surprise discovery when I've opened it. Went, oh, this package. And I was like, what's that?
I'm amazed that it was like mint.
It was
That's
in the comics still in
phenomenal.
mint condition. The envelope was pretty crap, but everything inside was lovely. So that was a lovely little find. So yeah, my 1-year-old buried under the garage copy.
Fresh as a daisy.
Fresh as a daisy. So that was a bit of a sidetrack while Leigh was away. So,
that's right.
What was it like when you, in comparison, what would you say it was like when you published your first book of someone else? When you became a publisher of other people's books?
That's a good question, Shane.
Well, in the time of Bronwyn, why Bronwyn took so long series, I worked on other books. I've worked on a book called Ever After, which again suffered from the very first Bronwyn treatment of like, it was printed at Officeworks, folded. It was very much more of a zine kind of thing, like where you make it yourself.
Yep.
That, it's a shame that like she decided to move on from comics, and I don't own the story. I just drew it, so I can't really do anything with it. Like if I had my way, I would redraw the first issue now and start it and keep going. But I don't own the story, so I can't. And then the second story I did was Scavenger. And that, I drew the same issue twice. The first one, he had already drawn Scavenger. And he wanted me to draw it so it matched what comics like look like, kind of thing. Like he'd roughly storyboarded it all and everything. He had the entire
cool.
10 issues done. And then we sent that to Dark Horse. We sent that around. We didn't get responses. And then a couple years later, we're like, you know what, we'll just do it properly ourselves. So issue 1 came out, and then he, with Bronwyn starting up again, and he moved into more writing novels. I think it's called The Cat Kingdom. Eli McGrath, The Cat Kingdom, if you want to go look it up. It's a good book. It's so it kind of fell by the wayside. We both agreed that for now it's done, like, because Scavenger was a 32-page book, and I could no way in hell do that and Bronwyn on a regular basis at the same time.
Makes sense.
Also, keeping in mind that you colour, pencil, ink, all your work as well. So you're not just penciling and then handing it over to, like somebody else.
Eli actually learned how to letter, so I didn't have to do it.
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Which was really good. So there's that collaboration angle. And then so that's kind of publishing other people's work, because you kind of have to like sign everything off with them saying, yes, this looks good, this is cool, I'm happy with it all. And then you print it, and then you have to both do the marketing of it and the events and all that stuff. And one thing I find with collaboration is one person always winds up feeling they're doing more. And it's not really... I think it is true to an extent. Because real talk, it's like the writer's written the book and hands you the script. And in my case, I had to pencil, letter, ink, scan, Photoshop, and he would letter. So work-wise, I predominantly did more. But then it kind of balances out in the end, because you both have to promote it, you both attend the events, and so I don't know. But with collaboration, it's best to find someone that you're really like-minded with.
And again, it comes back to communication, though, too, doesn't it, Zach? You just have to talk.
Before you start, go in knowing exactly what both of you or everyone wants from it.
Yeah.
And weed out any issues then. And that way, the books doesn't want it being published, and then you're starting to like rip each other's head off because you didn't like this or this.
Well,
so
I mean, only recently myself have collaborated with people, and one of the things from being, an individual creator, the one thing I always thought of is communications worked, and if there is an issue, handle it like an adult. Talk about it, because at the end of the day, if your heart, the whole team or whoever you're doing it with's heart is in the project, you are essentially both in it for the right reasons. You know what I mean? You believe in the character and you know what's happening. You've got to do this convention, you've got to do that. I think you struggle when you get an ego in collaboration. You know what I mean? When someone's ringing the bell all the time, and then that can be worrisome, I would think. But again, that's just
I've never really had that side of there's obviously going to be disagreements with I'd rather he not look like this. I want this. I want this, or I think this is undraw. Like when you have to go to the person and be like, I don't think this would look good, and then you can. But I think in that case, it's good to have examples and you justify why you don't think it works. Like you need the open dialogue to explain, this bit of the script, you don't need it because this panel takes out that entire page. So it is a case of sending pages as you draw them, and it is communication.
Mate.
But I think you also need to find someone
who's page, sending it, bang, finished, send.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, wait, you know, and sitting there, okay, do I continue on to the next page or wait, you know? And I get that. Like, you just got to communicate. That's all I'd say to anyone is communication is the key in creativity, man. You'll work it out. It's you know.
But
I
again,
mean,
it is finding the right people to collaborate with, though.
oh, for sure.
That will go
Yeah.
a long way. Because if you're on a different page from the beginning, your project's kind of doomed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you won't get past page 10, mate. You know, like it just won't happen. I would tend to agree. Zach, question. Shane elaborated on it before, but we've probably segued off ever so slightly, as we can do, you know, like when we're young as mates. From the point you published your first to the point where the two of you got Presents issue 1 and Presents Noir, to the point where you actually held the proofs. Now, you two, and this is a question to you too, Sis.
Oh, okay.
The two of you would have had private conversation because you communicate. I know you do. How was the feeling? First question, Zach, in comparison to you getting the first one published as the writer artist is the dream, I want to do it and I did it, in comparison to then becoming a publisher and you and Sis getting all of us together and, you know, like deadlines, this is what we got to do, and man managing and, you know, dealing with people under duress and stress, and life throws, you know, grenades at us sometimes and stuff. So you got to keep moving. You got to, you know, like have a game plan and stuff like that. But to get issue 1 and now you're on issue 2, what was the most satisfying factor for you, Zach, and then you, Sizzle, if that makes any sense at all, that question?
No, that makes total sense.
I didn't have to deal with any of the scheduling or anything. I just had to put the book together. So,
well, thanks for that answer, Zach. On to you, Sis.
But what was really cool was seeing everyone's work in print together.
Yeah.
Like, because while I was putting the book together, we were doing the drinking draws, we were drawing everyone's characters. So I think there was that attachment to it because you had drawn them, you knew the story, and it was extra because I think me and Shane were able to read everyone's book as well before it came out.
Yeah.
And we kind of knew the story of why they were doing the drinking draw. We knew the whole story or part 1, but we'd seen pages. So that was cool to see it completed in one book. And then at the same time, you're just like, it's cool that it's led to friendships in a way, because I would not have, chances are I would never have met the 3 other people in the book that I'm in, let alone the other 4 who are in Noir. And it all stemmed from the calendar in that regards, because since the calendar's come out, I've done more guest cover work and stuff than my entire time drawing books, and that's with people who were in the calendar. So I think there's that kind of bond because we all started a chapter together.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's how I feel exactly the same. Shane?
Your turn, Shane.
3 moments I had when I got the proof. I was like, wow, wow. I helped make this happen. But as cool as that was, it wasn't until there was a pile of them here in many boxes that I've gone, holy crap, this is real. I've done this. Holy crap, this is real. But it wasn't, I'd have to say the most satisfying feeling was when I opened up Noir and went to, I think it was the last story, which was Duncan's Bin Kitty, and just went, or maybe it was second last. I might be getting it mixed up.
Killer
But it
Bee, I
was-
think, is last in Noir, number 1.
Oh, okay. Might be the second last. Sorry.
I know where you're going with this, Shane, because I agree that.
And it was just, I've looked at it and I've gone, that's Duncan's first thing in print, and I made it happen.
Mm.
I made that happen. Holy crap! This is so cool. This is wow. And all I started out doing was trying to make a directory for people to find their comics at comic stores, and I've come to
Duncan
this.
nailed that too, man.
Oh, didn't he ever?
Yeah, he did.
That was an
really
impressive
good
intro.
job. I agree, 100%, man. Yeah.
So yeah, that was that. It came in 3 stages, and those were the 3 stages in that order, and they just the intensity increased with each thing. So yeah, it was just knowing that I'd help someone get printed for the first time was just, I don't know, mind blowing. It was just, it didn't feel real for a little while. It's like, how could this have been something I've done? I was just trying to make a website, and now I'm doing this.
And now you're hosting an all-day Australian Comic Book Day, and there's like I guess again, Spedsy was saying before, like we've all sat around, yarning and that early on, talking about it, and then I mean, realistically, I mean, it's a Australian Comic Book Day. Dean Rankin, he came up with the concept of Australian Comic Book Day. Is that correct? I mean,
he did.
What a great concept to Dean. I've never even met Dean, but what a brilliant thing. And you're hearing that alternate worlds in Melbourne had a thing with creators, and like there's this all day thing. I'm sure there's very
thing.
How good is that? How
cool is HQ were handing out pamphlets about today. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more, but they're the ones I've heard about. So yeah.
Oh man, there probably is, but I mean,
Drop Bear had Tim Styles in drawing.
Oh, that's right, Drop Bear. Yep, forgot about that one.
I think Mal Impact did some stuff as well.
Cool.
From what I've seen.
And Deez is having a special. I know he's doing that. I don't know what else Deez was doing, but I know he's having a special today for indie comics. So that's pretty cool.
How good is that? Well, what a great thing. But from my association with you guys, and anyone that knows me from the late night drinking draws knows that I'm like a little bit emotional at times. And if Tam was sitting here with you right now, she would tell you that all I think about is comic books. And she would tell you that from my experience with Shane, Zach, the friends that I've met and the people that I've had the opportunity to meet that I'm so lucky that, I can now call friends and, like people that I communicate with. It's been a fantastic experience, man. And, I would just like to probably pushing away a little bit from the point of what we're talking about with Zach, but you guys are the ComX, pair. The opportunity that, with this community, which is an open door, realistically, there's opportunities there for anyone that is interested. It's open. Shane, one of the most open, genuine men I've ever met. Zach, hard working, cool dude, lots of conversation, respect. Man, fuck, Australian comic books, it really is. I wasn't kidding either when I wore sunglasses in today, because I sat here for like 3 hours, man, and like I was watching stuff and laughing. And the future is bright. It's just about community and just moving forward, and then like everyone giving themselves a double thumbs up for the work they've done. Because sometimes, artists, writers, creators don't give themselves the opportunity to reflect. Some of us are drawing, writing, doing what we love while working. You know what I mean? Like there's, raising children, all these factors come into it. But the pulse is, it's creating, we're drawing, we're writing, we're doing our thing, we're trying to improve. And I think that's the best thing from my perspective today and my understanding of Australian Comic Book Day is that it's made it a community even bigger through camaraderie. So,
agreed.
yeah, I think
And
it's been.
I'm going to have to share this comment because for my self-indulgence,
Well,
that was my whole goal to that section of the website, was to find people like Mark who had never heard of it before.
There
So
you go.
just knowing I got one person is so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep. It's a brilliant thing. And I can't wait to see what's coming, man, further on down the track with everyone. Because even like, as Zach, you touched on before, mate, like just, man, I've even had, experiences over the last couple of weeks where, for years I've been drawing and creating by myself, and wondering why I was doing it, but just had a drive to do it and stuff. Just being able to, like, through the connections of, being, friends and talking and stuff, actually meeting people that 20 years ago you wouldn't be able to do it in anything other than, a letter and an envelope and a stamp, and hopefully they read it, and if they wanted to respond, they did or they didn't. It's a wonderful age where there was a couple of maybe a month ago where in one of the Friday night drinking draws, an individual, I don't know whether they were young or old, but I think they were called Onion Spring or Spring Onions or something
Spring Onion.
like that. And if Onion, you are, I would assume you are a younger person, judged on the drawing. It was bloody brilliant, mate, to see that person spend the time to do that character and I mean, it's good.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it's little things like that
have a
I
crack.
enjoy. And
yeah,
mate. I mean, none of us, if you don't ask, you don't know. You're not a dickhead for asking a question, I would assume, because otherwise I'd be classed A1 dickhead because I ask 20 questions a day. But,
That's one thing I found in the indie scene, though, before the ComX group now. It's no one really wanted to share their secrets, or no, like, oh, here's a good printer, don't go to this one, or have you seen this marker, it's better than that, or I think it's better than that brand. It was very closed off. Unless you're friends with them, then you could kind of talk. Otherwise you're just viewed as like a potential, like, purchaser of their book kind of thing. And if you came to them, it was more this is my own experience, I'm not talking for everyone, but it's more the, why are you talking to me, what's in it for you if I tell you this kind of thing. And
wow. That's unfortunate.
The difference in this group is everyone's just like, that's a cool drawing, where did you get the markers to do that, how did you achieve that with the markers, or you're kind of willing to learn off everyone, and it just benefits everyone.
Well, mate, from an artistic perspective, like, and when I say artistic, I will change that, creative perspective. There's an old saying that I got brought up with, and it's called gatehouse keeping. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, I know that one.
It's, when someone's been in the job for 20 years and they don't want to show the new guys, like, mate, this is, like, they keep the secrets for themselves to make them feel more valuable. I mean, you're just a snake eating its tail doing that. Like, I mean, it's a symbiote relationship. Whether you can support a Kickstarter, you might be broke that month, but you can share the shit out of it. You can pass it on to your friends. You can contribute a drawing. I mean, I don't, man, maybe it's the hippie in me. I don't know, but you guys know what I'm like. It's like, I think that's what it's about for me, 100%. Dave DeVries today, super busy human being. Chatted to him before the show. He's got markings up to here to do for his course. Mate, came on here today.
Make time for us.
bang, time, let's go. Let's teach people, let's talk about people. Let's encourage it. Let's show some stuff. I mean, mate, that's the best attitude ever. And I implore that everyone, where you can help another brother, or sister, put your hand out, pull them up, mate, with you. It's like,
It's simple as even just sharing the person's drawing on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
That's helping them. That's just expanding, like, possibly someone else who's never seen their work get viewed. And I honestly don't know why it's deemed so hard to do. Support's not always shown financially.
Oh, man, agreed.
I think that's something that needs to be remembered more often.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because
money's great, but you need an audience for your work as well. So
it is an audience thing, but I think you've got to show a certain.
I think prove just you're human in the end. You'll be alright.
Yeah, you got to show a certain quality too, in terms of friendship and listening. Like, I mean, I've had plenty of conversations where I'm just down here in my granny flat with my headphones on, and I don't get a lot of text messages, phone calls, that sort of thing. I think the last phone call I got was like fucking 10 days ago, man. I couldn't even tell you. It's like I don't even know what my ringtone is. It's and but then you'll get a bing, and you'll just what's going on? Hey, mate, I know you don't know me in that, but like, what's again, Zach? Just an easy example. Where could I find this? What could you do? This, man, I will sit there for half hour and talk to someone I don't know. If it means that, like, that's encouraged them to do a drawing or go and buy a comic book or, something. It's like, I don't really have a shut door policy, man, myself. And that's what I like about the ComX community. I don't think anyone here has a shut door policy.
No,
I don't think so.
No, we're pretty much here to help anyone who wants help at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If you don't need our help, that's cool. Don't need our help. If you want our help, then we're here to help.
Yeah.
That's the philosophy of ComX.
Always drop by to say hi. Like there's
doesn't even need our help. Just want to say hello. That's fine as well.
Because man, it's great. It's brilliant. But anyway, hey, back to Zach. I want to put you on the spot. Silence. Zach, don't do that to me. Come on. You've got Vivian to talk about as well, not just Bronwyn.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I'll do this.
There you
go.
Awesome. What's your next question?
Vivian. Let's have you on
Vivian?
about. Now, Vivian's not in issue 3, is it? Vivian.
No, Bronwyn's jumping into issue 3.
Yep. Yeah. And is that a new Bronwyn story?
It's her origin.
Oh.
Yes, that's very special.
That is a good one, man.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, you think of there, Zach, hey? You're silent but deadly, mate,
Facial hair's getting a lot of attention today. Thanks, Polar Knights.
Thank you, Polar Knights. Polar Knights, I actually saw an earlier cast on here today and was completely clean shaven this morning, but through meditation and like some sea salt, to produce this in the space of like 6 hours just to fit.
If I shave, I look 12. So I gave a beard now.
No, your beard's going all right, man.
Yeah, it's going well.
Yeah,
it matches the drawing up there. It's good. Super Zach.
Yeah. Super Zach. So on another note, we've got issue 2, ComX Presents. ready to rock and roll pretty much. We're all looking down. You've got the proofs right there, don't you, Zach? It's
Yep.
there you go. And that's the
There's
Ed
just
Kingsley cover, isn't it? You know, don't shout out to Ed. He's a
adjustments.
good dude.
Yeah, there's just some adjustments that need to be made through both books.
Yep.
That should be sorted by Monday and then printed by Monday afternoon.
Very good.
So
There
that's
you go.
good.
Yes. And you got something else you flashed up there earlier that
Yep.
possibly
Mark actually asked about that. He was like,
I'm doing a
"Super fast."
spreadsy here. Oh, there it is. Yep.
Oh, hang on, I'll boost you up. That deserves to be boosted up.
Yeah. So for everyone out there that has no idea who I am, I do a comic book called Battle for Bustle. And issue 4 is through ComX Studios. And that there is the proof of the upcoming issue that is about to come out as soon as we've sussed everything out. So, yes.
Yeah.
And you can find everything of mine through Shane ComX Shop. You can contact me. There you go. You can contact me through battleforbustle.com. Join me on Leigh Chalker Facebook or the Battle for Bustle Facebook page. Always available, like a chat. These two know I like a chat. So, if you want to open that door and you get me on the right day, you might be there for a while. I'm just warning you. I'm just giving you a heads up.
Well, we're getting close to the end. So, Zach, is there anything you want to add to your experience about becoming a publisher?
It's very different working solo. Like Bronwyn, I do all myself. The only other person I deal with is the printer. With Presents, you're dealing with in issue 1 and 2's case, it's dealing with the other 7 people. It's the talking with Shane to make sure he's up to date on stuff. Shane talking to me, making sure I've seen the emails and everything. And then it's the looking over the proofs, going over the cover designs, so you're constant. Once you're in like a team, publisher's dynamic, it's constant. Because yes, issue 2 is done, but now we're coming at people for the December deadline for number 3. So it's you're constantly, everyone thinks you're only here, but you're really like here.
Yeah.
Ahead, trying to keep ahead. So,
and then hopefully over time you're going to have more comics like mine. You've got Bin Kitty.
We've got
Bin Kitty coming.
Ongoing series, from what I understand as well. And
I'm currently putting the cover together for that.
Have you guys got a bit of an open policy to anyone that's new out there that may be listening, that I was once myself, has a comic book? We
have a submissions page on the actual site. So if you go to comx.studio, that's just studio, not with an S at the end. So comx.studio, that will take you to, in the menu, there's a submission button, and that will take you to pretty much what's required of you to submit and the email you need to submit to. That's probably the easiest way. If you're feeling a bit unsure, just throw me a line on Facebook. Shane Syddall, pretty easy to find. I'm the only Shane Syddall on Facebook as far as I know. And if you're a bit unsure, I'm happy to have a chat.
Even if you're not ready, just send a sample in and we can be like, and we can work a timeline out. And what's great about what we do is you own it. We don't own it. We're just printing it. So if you ever want to get like you sell it to another company, or you just want to learn enough that you can do it yourself, you can. Just be like, thank you, I'm done. And we're like, cool.
So we're here to help as long as you need the help.
The creator that comes to you maintains their IP.
Yes.
That's it. And that's what a lot of creators love, is to create an IP. For anyone that doesn't know, is intellectual property, which is your creation. These guys are here to help you, give you a hand, give you an idea, where you can improve what you can do. And as anyone that's watched today can see through the whole community, there's a lot of people here that are willing to help, not, across all boards. So if you've got someone you like out there, you want to reach out to them, mate, reach out. Because I don't know too many of anyone in the Australian comic book community, if there is any, that would shut the door on you straight up just from asking a question or showing a drawing or contributing in any way that they can. You may want to do a drawing of Bronwyn. You may want to do a drawing of Battle for Bustle. You may want to do a drawing of Killaroo. You may want to do a drawing of, Torn, that sort of stuff. Like, people are here to help any kid, anyone that's my age or our age, anyone that's older, that's ever, been sitting in a dark room. I just love doing this shit. I'm so nervous, or you have anxieties. Like, try as best as you can to put them aside and let those anxieties be alleviated and come forth, man. There's plenty of pathways.
We'll help best we can to get your creation out, so everyone gets to see it. Cool.
That's the name of the game, isn't it?
Yep.
Well, before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone that this is sort of like our rebirth of the CCCX show. I just need to go. It's not the normal time. The normal time would be. I just need to get rid of that. These are the normal times: 10 a.m. Saturday Australian Eastern Standard, and also 7 p.m. Friday Central, and that's US Central Standard Time. Because we actually do the show with a third fellow called Dustin, and the show's it's more of an educational show. I'll just get rid of that so our faces are back. It's more of an educational show, so along the lines of what we did with Dave DeVries. We try to talk through just different elements of the art of the the brain won't think of the word of the art form. There you go. That is making comics. So there will be from time to time interviews like we've done with Zach here, and but yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about learning more about the comics and connecting with other people in the community.
100%.
Yeah.
So it's been a great pleasure to be back with my old mate Syddall, aka Shane, but he's probably better known as Syddall these days.
I am these days.
To come back on and share enthusiasm and stuff for the art form. And from my perspective, not speaking hopefully out of school with CCCX, I can't wait for Dustin to be back part of the fold, because
next week,
he's another enthusiastic American creator that has a lot of knowledge, has a lot of, IPs and stuff going on. Man, one of the nicest dudes that's helped me a lot as well in my time of knowing him, with encouragement and that. And if we can help people learn, get a bit of a kickstart from how we did it. Like I said to Dave earlier, I was cutting word bubbles out, pinning them onto pages and stuff. If any programs people need to know of, meeting people, the whole lot, from my perspective as well, CCCX is an absolute open door. You know where to get Shane, you know where to find me, and you know where to find Zach. So if I can help in any regard, then please feel free to reach out.
Cool. And I've just shared a link to Zach's current Kickstarter for Bronwyn, the first 3 issues, the reprints. And
it's almost 75% funded.
We've only got 25% to go. Come on, people, get in there. These are awesome books. You'll be glad you got them. You'll be glad you got them. And if you can't get them, share the link around to other people so they get the joy of getting them. That's just as much help as actually getting them yourself.
Spread the word.
Well, I've got no outro for this show yet, so so we just get to wait.
Listen to me ramble.
Zach, it's always a pleasure, mate, seeing you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you,
Is
Zach.
it though?
You are a Zach.
I better go. Okay, guys.
You guys,
thank you
see
for
the
watching.
Thank you, everyone.
later on.
Thank
Take
you for
care. Thank you. Bye.
participating. Thank you. Bye.